It's June 12th, 2022. It's Sunday morning. I'm watching the CBS mornings that New York puts on, the one with Jane Pauley on Sundays. And this piece comes on. It's some form of whatever. I mean, again, I'd say the word piecemeal, but I really don't want to dirty the word. So on the screen, it's this guy, how to be an anti-racist. And then it's stamped from the beginning. But, I mean, like, when I read it in Go Spell, it looks like stampede instead of stamped. But again, in the Warhouse and the warehouse. And he's talking about a racist. And like, Messenger is not part of my us. Somebody else's whatever. And he's talking very forcefully about race. And all I can hear is erase. In English, especially this version, if I was speaking as Superman's Lois Lane, perhaps. Superman having X-ray vision. X-ray technology picks up on lead-based something when it goes through the machine. It would be that there is lead and some form of writing is how this common area describes it. But if you make a mistake with this pencil that has number 2 lead in the middle and a yellow outside, then you erase what was written as if it never happened. The adults said this when I was younger. Again, like, coming from a man who wrote with a quill and ink in some calligraphy way of, like, mastercrafts, there is no process for erase. There's either correct or scrap. So now I'm listening to this argument. I've heard it like 1,000 times before. It's something that's all over this program and media. I don't know how it got involved. But it's getting very loud and proud and obnoxious, and it's borderline harassment, honestly, I feel, from sitting here. I mean, I don't have a voice as this person does, screaming about racist and anti-racist. I really personally feel like this argument is trying to erase all of my ancestry and all of the things that we were, except I have this one, I don't know if you call it feather in your cap. I mean, I went to Washington, D.C., where they say these capital things happen. I'm not part of that process. I haven't been invited in, but I went down there and I verified that their educational agreement in the us of this America, or like the way America is supposed to be formed or shaped or whatever before other things come in and then call itself an American label, there were like foundational on electricity specifically and transportation, specific lines of pictorial reference and names in this U.S. patent office that were accredited to very specific North Americans. So I just feel that this harassment on the television as a person trying to learn and figure out where this U.S. government and this America, how it's shaping up, where we're supposed to be, like what we're supposed to be looking for and things. I'm looking at it and I see something looks non-familial, but really, I mean, it's in a studio with its own next gen, with earphones on his next gen, recording a race book. And I've been erased out. I was not given the same level of opportunity with my sons. And not, I have four. Not one of us were invited into a studio to voice a book on record the way that this man and his son are participating. So I really do feel this sense of erasure. I'm not quite sure how this is, or why this is an allowable whatever. But here, this is what it looks like this morning. Again, it's like inescapable at this point. Whenever you turn on the television, it's some loud, proud movement. And I, again, am in this really horrific situation in New York where it's like, I don't know where anything I can enjoy spending time with. I mean, like, other people are allowed to enjoy their lives. Other people are allowed freedom socially, respectfully. I have not been given that level of humanity just yet. I mean, like, there's been no enjoying company. I mean, I just went down to Washington, D.C. That's the closest I got. But, like, I see people do this as, like, a regular thing. They grow up with one another. They go to college with one another. They have children with one another. They raise those children with one another. They start foundations and charity work. No idea why they were allowed that level of participation, and the things that were available to me looked so different. It's so confusing. Just to keep it at we're both being erased. I'm suffering worse than you are. What's going on? Like, any help out there?
Inherently racist or anti-racist. It's about what we're doing. And so when we're expressing that the racial groups are equals, we're being anti-racist. When we're supporting a policy that is leading to a racial disparity, we're being racist.
You mean an erasure type situation? They also had a piece on here this morning about, like, presidencies and Nixon and this Watergate thing. I've heard these words. They didn't teach it in school at all. Didn't, like, they mentioned the vocabulary so one could maybe have a conversation, or at least know what sounds to look out for if they met somebody with intellect. But how or what it was, what it meant along this broken road of Mainfuza and Mainfuja, and some 7-Year War, some French and Indian War, some American revolting results. And, I mean, this situation of everyday life not being really much to, like, wake up for, and no real avenue other than boulevard to walk on every day. I get up every day, I put my shoes on, and I go for a walk on the boulevard. And I think to myself just how useless bearing a child into this life has been.
Racist, I'm encouraging people to constantly think about what are we doing or even not doing.
Bigots, racists, like Ibrahim Kendi.
His views have been polarizing, to say the least.
How to be an anti-racist.
His work was injected into the hearings for Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson.
More erasure going on under the guise of racist, bigots. I don't know what the words that the powers that be are using in this particular secular divergence, but it's really frightening if you have skin in the game and children on deck. And on deck meaning like a baseball game, Little League, where all the kids get trophies at this Little League. Like, there's no MVP. There's no, like, it's just, they're all, you show up, you get something. Uh-huh.
Jackson.
Anti-Racist Baby by Ibram Kendi.
Courtesy of Senator Ted Cruz.
One portion of the book says babies are taught to be racist or anti-racist. There is no neutrality.
It is dangerous to tell the truth today. I would know. But as we've learned in the last few years, it is dangerous to not tell the truth.
For people who are like, oh, slavery was over 200 years ago, why are we going back to that? Things are level now. It's a level playing field.
Well, first, if it was a level playing field, there would not be all these racial disparities from health to wealth to education to incarceration. Or you think there is a level playing field, and the reason why certain racial groups are less wealthy or more likely to be poor or more likely to die or more likely to be incarcerated is because there's something inferior about them. I don't think that any racial group is inferior or superior. And so what that means is there isn't a level playing field. And then the question becomes, why isn't there a level playing field? And you can't answer that question without talking about the present and the history of this country. And you can't talk about American history without talking about slavery.
Kendi has 2 new books coming out aimed at children and parents. One is a takeoff on the classic book Goodnight Moon.
The moon sees all kids,
Whoever they are.
whoever they are.
His 6-year-old daughter, Imani, recorded the audiobook with some coaching from Dad.
The moon delights
When every child falls asleep,
when every child falls asleep.
including Imani, including.
Okay, so here's a piece of Real Life Sunday headline. It says thousands rallied on Washington's National Mall and across the nation yesterday. Today's June 12th, 2022. Pushing for gun control measures after recent mass shootings. Speakers called for U.S. senators to take action or risk being voted out of office. And it's called March for Our Lives. In something called Parkland.
And if we don't get it!
And then it goes into this Nixon thing, which again sets the table for talk and discussion, perhaps, if I was in an intellectual community, which I'm not, and about his presidency and this Watergate and then this scandal and this horrific stain on reputation that went on. Again, this was all done early 70s to make sure it never happened again, and to make sure that in other social whatevers that it didn't take that turn, but here we are.
I'd like to propose a toast.
Now, here's the commercial preceding the Sunday morning mention. It's Broadway's Tony and Grammy winning Best Musical, Hadestown, Hades, which again just shows whatever. And I'm not a participant in this. I don't know who keeps pushing for money-making opportunities on purposely documenting and telling the story in such a way that there's just never any correctness. It just keeps making and painting the picture worse and worse.
The Watergate break-in, 50 years on. Believe it or not, some of its long-held secrets are just now coming to light. Here's Robert Costa.
It's almost surreal to recall how Watergate began in the most mundane of spaces.
We are standing where the burglars were arrested.
That's right.
An unraveling of a presidency begins here.
It begins right in this space.
Sage Publishing now up.
This is how they tell the story. I have no idea how these... I mean, if I sat here long enough, maybe I could figure out... Oh, it says London, New Delhi, and Washington, D.C. Oh, hello. I mean... I just can't.
Occupies the site of the crime. Todd Baldwin is one of its executives.
You can look out here and see the Watergate Hotel. And that was the line of sight that they needed to be able to tap the line and hear what was going on.
Now, if New Delhi is India, and they're experiencing a population control problem, why is the potential answer some war between the French and the Indian that some other people call seven? I don't know, like, how this ties into, like, whatever and whatever, but it did come through on the America's Most Revolting War. As far as time travelers and that TV show thing goes, or that movie thing goes, or whatever, put it on. I did see the opera singer decapitated. I mean, message received. I already went through World of Hurt in this Havana Syndrome. I mean, like, these are real events tied into real things going wrong, and I really don't know where the help ever arrives from.
In 1972, this was the office of the Democratic National Committee.
So this is the stairwell that the burglars came up to break into the DNC.
Nondescript, brick, white paint, a lot of dust.
And yet so much happened here.
Watergate is an event that has been so well documented over the years, but it's one that we pretty profoundly misunderstand.
So they agree that they still, even all their college efforts, all their papers, all their books, all their TED Talks, or whatever the humans are up to these days, still don't understand it.
Journalist and historian Garrett Graff says 50 years on, we are still transfixed by Watergate.
The story of Watergate is one of the great tragedies of American politics.
And he
Watergate. Now, is that where naval yards were having shipping and containment problems? Because the arms, legs, and navals that walk around, I put up this morning, doesn't look familial either. And the weather reporter that was speaking to those drill sergeants had been denied, even though his dad was able to a few generations ago. There seems to be some generational gap and some real insidious things going on, so it gets really confusing which side is acceptable and, like, how to do anything and whatever.
adds we are still piecing it together.
Part of what's so fascinating is that the two central questions of the burglary itself are still unsettled. We don't know who ordered the burglary, and we don't really know what the burglars were up to that night.
That's kind of how I feel about Obama landing in burglarizing. I mean, like, it's like the Hamburglar at this point. It's just what was the modus operandi? What was the mission? Like, why was there a whole nother level of not okay? Like, where's the safety word to, like, abort a mission, like, missions? I mean, where are the superheroes in Justice League? And, like, who took what money? Then yesterday I was watching, they had on this I went to go watch the 4 o'clock news, but some soccer game was on in some league I'd never heard of. They gather under this umbrella of MLS, and I saw Target, and I'm like, so now when I shop for rags in some, like, they knocked out sweatshops, they just industrialized sewing lots, they have these really horrific fabrics now and horrible tailoring, spandex and whatnot. So now that contribution and whatever insidious participants those were, that then led to this disgusting fashion nightmare. It's like all intertwined in this thing. I'm like, so now I have to go to Target to get clothes because it's the cheapest and it's what's affordable and whatever. So I go there and now I see that they're paying for people to have really great lives and have athletic contracts and being flown all over the world and catered to while I'm sitting here still in this horrible disaster. And I really don't see any hand to hold or how to help myself out of this. I'm in like a dead end. Rip current, swimming parallel, attempting to swim diagonal back to shore to look for a lifeguard. But I don't even think there's one on duty at this point.
Has put it all together in a new book, appropriately called Watergate, A New History, published by Simon & Schuster, part of Paramount Global, which includes CBS News.
The adage that the cover-up is always worse than the crime, I think actually turns out not to be true in Watergate. It was Nixon's crimes that were quite terrible, myriad and manifold. Ultimately, 69 people were indicted or charged with crimes.
Graph traced.
There's that 69 reference where it's a yin and a yang, it's the past and the future. There's people working both angles, and it's a real nightmare now that time travel is just like a common area ability. Like, there's people traveling inside the 3 acceptable time zones inside the US, and then they're going to outside time travel. I mean, this disability of time, which used to only be physician referenced as aviation, as an aviation disease, burden of disease, if you will, at certain levels. I mean, I don't know where Requiem stands on this, if they're aware of just how horrible it's become. Until my battery dies. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza. This is the rest of it.
People were indicted or charged with crimes.
Graph traces Watergate back to Richard Nixon's lifelong sense of grievance and paranoia.
Just think how much you're going to be missing. You don't have Nixon to kick around anymore.
Richard Nixon woke up every morning angry. He woke up every morning feeling under siege. And he is someone sort of at every stage of his political career who chooses the low road.
Nixon's low road spawned a sprawling and unpredictable culture of criminality. But the president wasn't looped in on the Watergate break-in.
The funniest bit of the cover-up is that Nixon can't fathom why anyone would actually want to break into the Democratic Party offices, and can't believe that anyone would be that stupid.
And then there's the deeper story of Deep Throat, who was lionized by Hollywood.
That was the present of what they were currently up to their eyeballs in at the time. And then there's the deep whatever of the long drive home of what is the future gonna look like if we, in this moment of 1960 something, can't get this scandalous and this whatever and figure out how to plan agenda and White House items into where safety zone. Hello?
Just follow the money.
In 2005, former FBI Associate Director Mark Felt stepped out of the shadows. But he had long denied he was Deep Throat.
No, I'm not Deep Throat, and the only thing I can say is that I wouldn't be ashamed to be.
Garrett, you're pretty tough on Deep Throat. He was a bureaucrat trying to succeed J. Edgar Hoover at the FBI.
This is not someone who is waking up in the morning trying to protect American democracy. This is someone who wants a job that he didn't get. He's doing some sort of brutal, backstabbing, knife-fighting, office succession politics.
Is that how they describe doing the right thing for yourself and your children when everything's been robbed from you? Because it seems like the inner circle is telling the story all wrong, still trying to weed out potential helpful units in some, I don't know what.